G'day and welcome to the National Virtual Expo. I'm your host Rob Malicki and welcome to this session, which I'm genuinely excited about, on the University of Divinity. The reason I'm excited is because I don't usually get to talk a lot about this institution. And so before we get started, I just want to acknowledge the land on which I live and work. It's the Gadigal land of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to the traditional custodians of this land. And before we get started, I do want to let you know what's coming up in the next 20 minutes or so. We're going to be covering off what the University of Divinity is known for, who'd be doing well to study there. We're also going to be finding out about its academic strengths and then looking at the hard data, which is things like student satisfaction, employment rates, and some of the other rankings. I'm going to be really honest and transparent about what those numbers mean for you, and we're going to try to get behind all of the hype when it comes to rankings and ratings. And finally, I'm going to talk about what kind of other institutions you might compare the Uni of Divinity against, just to help you build your shortlist. I want to say thank you to those people who are joining me live for this session. You can participate by asking your questions in the chat, whether you're on Facebook or Instagram or here on the session hub. You can ask your questions and I will endeavour to answer all of those for you. If not as part of this session, then through the Choosing Your Uni Discord, and you can find the link to that in the session details down below. If you're a parent, you can also join the Facebook community for the Virtual Expo, and we'll also be answering questions in there. Now, before I kick off and get into the details about the Uni of Divinity, I do want to just acknowledge our major presenting partner, Southern Cross University, without whom this whole Virtual Expo wouldn't have been possible. So a quick word from SCU, and then we'll get into this session.
Today's students are tomorrow's front line. Today's visionaries will become tomorrow's leaders. And today's research will discover tomorrow's solutions. For ourselves, for others, and for our world. Southern Cross University, transforming tomorrow.
Well, if I were to ask you which university has the highest student satisfaction rating of any university in Australia, what would you say? Maybe Monash University, the Uni of Sydney, Melbourne? It's none of them. It's not the Uni of New South Wales or the University of Queensland. No, it's a tiny specialist university that I almost guarantee you nobody has ever heard of, except if you're here at this session. And yes, it is the University of Divinity at 89.8% student satisfaction. That's not a typo. It's an incredible result that is the top of the pack in Australia. But let me save you some time. This university is not for you if you're looking for a big campus experience with a uni bar. In fact, it's not for you if you're looking for an institution with the student bar, sports club, and 40,000 students walking around. And it doesn't have, it's not that it doesn't have different degrees available, but it's also not for you if you're looking for a general degree in fields such as science or business or engineering or the arts. It doesn't offer those. And it's definitely not for you if you're uncomfortable with the idea that your university has an explicitly Christian identity because it does, proudly, and that shapes everything about the place. But, and here's the really important thing, if you're interested in theology, in philosophy, ministry, counselling, and working in faith-based communities, or if you're a mature age student already serving in church and wanting to deepen your knowledge, then what I'm about to tell you might genuinely change your shortlist and genuinely get you excited. So let's talk more about the University of Divinity. And let's start by looking at 3 things that the university is genuinely known for. Now, first is, of course, a deep specialisation, a complete focus on things like theology and ministry. This is not a university that just has a theology, department bolted onto the side as an afterthought. Divinity has been doing this since 1910, originally as the Melbourne College of Divinity. And it's the only thing that it does. Theology, biblical studies, philosophy, ethics, spirituality, counselling, pastoral care, and ministry leadership. That's it. That's the menu. There's no engineering school down the hall. There's no business faculty competing for funding. Every dollar, every staff member, every course is pointed in the same direction. So if this is your field, you get an entire university built around that and nothing else. Secondly is the collegiate model, and this is genuinely unusual in Australia. You don't just enrol at the University of Divinity as one blob of students. You in fact enrol through one of 12 affiliated theological colleges or 3 university level schools that are spread across Melbourne, Sydney, Adelaide, Brisbane and Perth. Each college is connected to a particular Christian tradition, whether that's Anglican, Catholic, Baptist, Lutheran, United Church, Salvation Army, or others. Your degree comes from the University of Divinity, but your day-to-day learning community is shaped by the college that you choose. Now that means small classes. It means close relationships with your academics and your teachers. And it means a community that genuinely shares your values and your tradition. It's actually closer to how Oxford and Cambridge work in the UK than to how most universities operate. And I think it's one of the big reasons for that incredibly high student satisfaction number. And speaking of that incredibly high number that I mentioned up front, that's also one of the absolute standout numbers. 89.8% of students are satisfied with their experience. That comes from the Quilt National Survey, the Quality Indicators for Learning and Teaching, and it's not a blip. That's from a survey of students across Australia, and it is Australia's highest student satisfaction. Every uni participates in that, and the Uni of Divinity doesn't just do well. It has been consistently leading the pack. It's topped of the rankings in 2018, in 2019, in 2023, and again, it was very strong in 2024. Essentially, it competes with Bond University, also small and private, up on the Gold Coast. And when you're small and you're specialist, you can do things that big universities struggle with. And this is the proof. Now, I do need to be upfront about something. This is what we call a Table B university. It's not a public university. It's a small private institution. And that means that students don't get access to HECS Help, which is the main government loan scheme where domestic students at public universities have their tuition subsidised and repaid through tax. Instead, students at the Uni of Divinity access what's called Fee Help, which works similarly. You can still repay your fees through the tax system, but it applies to at a different rate to those public, what we call Table A providers. The university has confirmed that fee help loans don't apply to their students. What that means is when you apply for fee help, institutions have the right to charge 20% on top for the administration of that loan. University of Divinity doesn't charge that, and that does save you compared to some other providers. If you want to understand how all of this stuff works around fees and everything like that, we've got a great session with the Australian government that talks about Australian government support for university studies. Details in the session catalogue down below. Let's now maybe talk about the academic offering at Divinity and what makes it genuinely distinctive from other institutions. Firstly, at undergraduate level, you've got bachelor's degrees in theology, ministry, and counselling that take 3 years full-time. And that's standard for an Australian university degree setup. But below that, we've also got diplomas and advanced diplomas for people who want a shorter qualification or who want a stepping stone into an undergraduate bachelor's degrees. There are also undergraduate certificates for those people who want to test the waters. So this is a really nice way to start getting an introduction to university level studies without having to make the full commitment. At postgraduate level, and this is where a lot of Uni of Divinity's strengths sit, the range of options is surprisingly broad for a specialist institution. You've got graduate certificates and graduate diplomas and master's degrees in everything from spiritual direction to professional supervision to teaching religious education. There are master's degrees like the Master of Divinity, the Master of Theological Studies, the Master of Pastoral and Spiritual Care, a Master of Spirituality, a Master of Philosophical Studies, and more. And then there's actually the research level as well. There's a Master of Philosophy, a PhD, and a Doctor of Professional Practice. So in fact, the range of options for students in the theology and spiritual spaces is extensive. Now, something that's really worth knowing about this institution is that a huge proportion of the students are studying at that postgraduate level. In 2023, postgraduate coursework students made up roughly half of the total student load, with undergraduates making up about 40% and research students making up the rest. What that tells you is that this is a university where a lot of people are coming back for deeper study or professional development. They're not just coming straight in from school. If you are coming straight in from school, you'll be learning in an environment with older, more experienced classmates, which some people find incredibly enriching. Now, let's talk about the research side of the Uni of Divinity, because it is a small institution, just 1,300 students in total. But within its specialist field, its research really matters. The focus areas include things like biblical studies and ancient languages, historical theology, practical ministry and mission, spirituality, philosophy and ethics, and indigenous theologies. Now, that last one for me is significant. The university has established a School of Indigenous Studies dedicated to First Nations-led scholarship and First Nations theological perspectives. Let's just say that's not just a token program, it's a structural commitment with its own school. The three central schools, the School of Graduate Research, the School of Professional Practice, and the School of Indigenous Studies, each coordinate a different dimension of the university's work. Research training, professional formation and supervision, and Indigenous engagement. For a university of this size, that's genuinely a thoughtful structure. Now let's talk about tuition fees for a moment, because they're also worth noting. A standard undergraduate unit in 2025 costs around about $2,100, which means a full-time student studying for a full year, you typically do 8 subjects in a year, comes in at around $16,000 to $17,000. A postgraduate coursework program for a year is around $19,500. But here's an interesting detail. The fees are the same for domestic and international students, which is almost unheard of in Australian higher education. Normally, international students are charged significantly more. So that's a real advantage for someone that's interested in studying here from overseas. Facilities-wise, you're not going to find a massive central campus. Each college has its own teaching spaces, its own libraries, chapels, and community areas. Some are located on or near major university campuses in inner Melbourne. Others sit in seminary sites or church properties. The library network across the colleges is extensive, specialist theological collections that you won't find at a general university. And teaching is genuinely delivered through a mix of face-to-face, intensive block, online, and hybrid modes, which really matters when many students are studying part-time alongside work or ministry. Now, one of the things I'm really excited about this National Virtual Expo is we've got a huge range of keynotes on all sorts of different topic areas, including building confidence around your decision making, around managing your money, and all sorts of other topics, building a career of your dreams. You'll find the details of all those keynotes in the session catalogue below. All right, let's talk more about those statistics and those rankings, because here's where it gets really interesting. The Uni of Divinity's satisfaction scores are extraordinary. But what happens when you look at employment outcomes and salary data? And what do the big international rankings have to say about this, honestly, this very, very small institution in Australia? Some of these numbers might surprise you, others might raise some questions for you. So let's go through and I'll give you an honest opinion about what I think. Firstly, that student satisfaction number that we've mentioned several times already, and it's generally incredible. For context, it's at 90%, and most Australian universities somewhere sit in the mid to low 70s. The highest sort of more traditional university is Bond University at 88.3%. And as we've said, Uni of Divinity is number one. Not a fluke. They've been at or near the top of that chart for many, many years. Small class sizes, a tight-knit specialty community, and staff who know your name, as well as that genuine sense of shared purpose. That's what drives a number like this. Teaching quality basically tracks at the same sort of level. When students feel known and they feel supported, when staff are deeply expert in a focused field, the teaching ratings follow, and Divinity does really well. Now, graduate employment is something where I need to flag. The Quilt Graduate Outcomes doesn't report a separate overall employment figure for the University of Divinity in the standard rankings data. The sample sizes from the university are really small because the university is small. The research indicates around 77.8% of full-time employment for undergraduate studies and a very strong 94.6% for postgraduates. That postgraduate figure is quite exceptional. It reflects the fact that many postgraduate students are already working in ministry or in professional roles and they're upskilling. The undergraduate figure is roughly in line with national averages. But of course, because it's a small institution graduating small numbers of students, literally individuals getting jobs or not can actually meaningfully shift those statistics from year to year. So take that all with a grain of salt. When it comes to median graduate salaries, we don't actually have a statistic for the University of Divinity in the national data set. And that's once again because that sample size is small and it's an issue. It's also an issue partly because many graduates enter ministry, chaplaincy, and not-for-profit roles where salaries are structured differently from commercial industries. If we're talking about international rankings, Uni of Divinity is not listed in either the QS World University Rankings or the Times Higher Education World Uni Rankings. And that's not a mark against it. Those rankings measure things like research output, research citations, international reputation across dozens of disciplines. So a very small specialist institution with 1,300 students in a single field is never, ever going to appear on those lists. That doesn't mean that the education is weak. It just means that those ranking systems aren't designed for institutions like this. So what does this all mean for you? Well, if you're choosing the Uni of Divinity, you're choosing based on teaching quality, based on community, based on specialist depth, and the fit with both your vocation and your values. You're not really worried about a global ranking number. So honestly, you can put all of those numbers to one side and focus on really what matters to you. Now let's have a think about who you might compare, which institutions you might compare the University of Divinity to. And there's a number. The first one to me would be Australian Catholic University. It has a number of exceptionally strong campuses around Australia and also has an incredibly strong theological program. So depending on what kind of educational experience you're looking for, this may be the one for you. ACU has a number of more traditional campuses. They're still not large on a national scale. The ACU campuses tend to be compact, they tend to be oriented around a smaller number of subjects and still gives you that strong community feel. However, it's heading more into the territory that you would expect to find. So if you're looking for that kind of experience like at the Uni of Divinity, but perhaps also looking to have exposure to some of the other subject areas that are available at a traditional uni, ACU 100% worth a strong look in my opinion. The second is the University of Notre Dame, also not a super well-known institution, but possibly the closest match in terms of institutional character. Notre Dame is also a small, private and faith-based university with a strong emphasis on pastoral care, small classrooms and personal attention. It offers theology and philosophy alongside a wider range of disciplines like law, medicine and education. Like ACU, if you want that faith-based community, but you also want your options across other fields, Notre Dame gives that to you. If you want a pure theological experience and theological depth, the Uni of Divinity absolutely goes deeper. Notre Dame has campuses in Sydney and in Fremantle in Western Australia. And the third, and this is also one that many people may not have heard of, which may seem to come from left field, but that's Avondale University. It's also another small, private, faith Australian university. But it shares the same ethos of community-driven learning, of Christian identity, and of close staff and student relationships and collaboration. It does have a broader offering than the University of Divinity, but it is much smaller than a typical public university. So if that model of small, values-driven, faith-based education appeals to you, I reckon Avondale is also worth understanding and having a look at. So we've got sessions on every Australian university and you can check those out once again down in the session catalogue below. And one more thing is that if you're still figuring out whether university is even the right move for you, I've got a whole session which is called Start Here. Start Here. Getting started with choosing a uni. And we're going to go over the fundamentals of how to actually make this kind of decision. That's it for this session on the University of Divinity. Any questions that you might have, you can ask them in the Choosing Your Uni Discord or in the Facebook parent community. It's been great talking with you. Once again, very excited. I don't often get to talk about the Uni of Divinity. Have yourself an awesome afternoon and I'll see you at another session throughout this virtual expo. Have a great day. Well, I hope you got something out of this session. And if you have any questions at all, you can head to choosingyouruni.com and ask Lumen. Lumen is your AI guide who knows about every university, every pathway, every option that we've talked about throughout this virtual expo. And Lumen is available to talk to you 24/7. So it's ready when you are.